Hello, everyone. This is the Hungry Math Professor here, and thank you for coming to my channel. And today we're going to discuss the Problems of Philosophy by Bertrand Russell. And this is it's about a 100-page book, and it's very well written. I highly recommend this book, especially if you're new to philosophy, or maybe you've read some philosophy, but you're looking for like an overall thread, like what's this all about? um, and maybe you're feeling a little bit confused about some philosophers or what's going on, then this book is perfect. I mean, it's like a philosophy 101 class. It's so well written. And, if you've read some amount of philosophy, you know that it's not always very well written. And so it's a real breath of fresh air when there is something so well written like this. And Bertrand Russell in general is a great writer. He can explain some very difficult concepts in just a few pages very well. So I highly recommend it. It focuses almost exclusively on epistemology, which is the study of how do we know what we know. So the study of knowledge and beliefs and truth. And of course, you're not going to learn about every single philosopher that said something about this topic, but he covers the main points, and each chapter focuses on one particular question, which has been a big question in philosophy, and moves from there. Bertrand Russell lived from 1872 to 1970. This book was written in 1912, and Bertrand Russell is famous for being an analytic philosopher. So that means there's a focus on logic and mathematics and a deep analysis of language, right? The difference between when we do logic and mathematics, we get to use the symbolic language to express truths. But in philosophy, we have to use natural language. And so, from an analytic philosophy point of view, if we're going to use natural language, we better analyze that language very carefully. And we won't maybe be able to express it like a symbolic language like we would in mathematics or logic, but we better analyze it as if, in a very logical, analytic way in order to do the best we can to make these arguments reasonable and to not trip ourselves up. And so the last chapter in this book is really nice because it's called The Value of Philosophy. So he ends on a chapter trying to give, from Bertrand Russell's point of view, what is the value of philosophy. And philosophy as a field, I think, has to defend itself more than most, perhaps. And so let me just read a few paragraphs from this last chapter. Here's Bertrand Russell. Having now come to the end of our brief and very incomplete review of the problems of philosophy, it will be well to consider, in conclusion, what is the value of philosophy and why it ought to be studied. It is the more necessary to consider this question in view of the fact that many men, under the influence of science or of practical affairs, are inclined to doubt whether philosophy is anything better than innocent but useless trifling, hair splitting distinctions, and controversies on matters concerning which knowledge is impossible. Skipping ahead, there are many questions, and among them those that are of the profoundest interest to our spiritual life, which, so far as we can see, must remain insoluble to the human intellect unless its powers become of quite a different order from what they are now. Has the universe any unity of plan or purpose, or is it a fortuitous concourse of atoms? Is consciousness a permanent part of the universe, giving hope of indefinite growth and wisdom, or is it a transitory accident on a small planet on which life must ultimately become impossible? Are good and evil of importance to the universe or only to man? Such questions are asked by philosophy and variously answered by various philosophers. But it would seem that, whether answers be otherwise discoverable or not, the answers suggested by philosophy are none of them demonstrably true. Yet, however slight might be the hope of discovering an answer, it is a part of the business of philosophy to continue the consideration of such questions, to make us aware of their importance, to examine all the approaches to them, and to keep alive that speculative interest in the universe which is apt to be killed by confining ourselves to definitely ascertainable knowledge. And then the conclusion of this chapter I really like, and I'll leave it there. Thus, to sum up our discussion of the value of philosophy, philosophy is to be studied, not for the sake of any definite answers to its questions, since no definite answers can, as a rule, be known to be true, but rather for the sake of the questions themselves, because these questions enlarge our conception of what is possible, enrich our intellectual imagination, and diminish the dogmatic assurance which closes the mind against speculation. But above all, because through the greatness of the universe which philosophy contemplates, the mind also is rendered great and becomes capable of that union with the universe which constitutes his highest good. So I encourage you, please take a look at this book. Um, you'll learn a lot, and I think you'll be inspired by Bertrand Russell's just great writing and way of explaining these kinds of things and his just honesty. So please let me know what you think, like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you at another discussion.